Some at home today. A family tradition since 1897. Online at papanicholas.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. For the last couple of days, we've been talking about this case out of Hinsdale South. This basketball player, Brendan Savage, who was cut from the team, even though that he was a standout as a sophomore and a junior. And then a lawsuit was filed by his mom, his family, to get him reinstated on the team. And ultimately, he has been reinstated on the team. But the reporting on this has been a bit shoddy, which is not unusual for Chicago, in terms of how this all went down, how it got to the point of him being cut and the matter being litigated. So we're pleased to have his mom, Erin Savage, join us to fill in some of these blanks. Erin Savage, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Sure.
So the previous coach under whom your son played, there was a complaint filed against him, and that seems to be, at least from the reporting, what started this whole process. So what was the nature of that? What happened between your son and the previous coach?
So Mr. Moretti taught Brendan's AP US history class last year. So Brendan had him both in this AP class, and he had him as the coach. And I'm not really sure why he had a problem with Brendan, but Brendan started out the season with tendinopathy in his knees, and my husband's a physical therapist, and he said, just don't play at the Thanksgiving tournament. Just wait till conference. The longer you rest your knees, the better off you'll be. It's really hard to rehab from a tendinopathy. So the coach started off by just giving Brendan a hard time for not playing, telling him, why don't you just go get a cortisone shot? That was not an appropriate way to treat the tendinopathy. And my husband was irritated. He's like, yeah, cortisone could kill the good tissue. Like, he shouldn't be giving you this advice. And then he would say things to Brendan like, you just don't want to play, do you? You're never going to play. You just don't want to. And he compared him to somebody on the football team, I don't remember, somebody who hadn't really played all season because of an injury. And he's like, you're just going to be like that kid, and you're not going to play. And it just kind of, spiraled from there. And he would, in the classroom, gradually. And it wasn't just, I want to point out, it wasn't just that he was giving Brendan a hard time. Across the board, he gave other students a hard time and just said inappropriate things. He crossed a line, and it was really appalling, some of the things it said. So he would say things to Brendan like, I heard you're just he took him aside, so this wasn't in front of the whole class, but like after class he called him up and he said, I heard you're just a bench warmer on your AAU team, which was his travel team. And which meant he did some digging. This had nothing to do with Hinsdale South. He put on a video of Vietnam vets one day, and he said, so we're going to watch this video. You'll notice a lot of these guys are amputees. And then he turned to the entire class, in front of the entire class, and he said, so Brendan, maybe after you watch this, you can stop complaining about your knees when you play basketball. Which just had absolutely, completely irrelevant, was inappropriate. He said things to one kid. He found out they had a discussion about politics, found out her parents voted for Trump, and he called her Trumpy regularly in front of the class. Another girl's dad is a lawyer, so he called her Miss Hinsdale Central whenever she came, during class time. He said to Asian students, I know you'd rather be in math class, but this is social studies. He, in front of the whole class one day, said to Brendan, thinking back on our varsity season, when I think about all the games that we lost, any game we lost, I think that it's because you were a selfish player. Nobody would call Brendan a selfish player.
Yeah. Well, so you took this information to the school board, and they decided that he's been demoted. He's not the varsity coach anymore, correct? He's a freshman coach?
Yeah. We tried. We started with the athletic director. He did nothing. I went to the history department chair. She said, well, nobody's really complained about him. Everybody really likes him. I was like, so what? This is because people are afraid to come forward. And then we went to the principal and then launched a formal complaint. And then the superintendent, we got a letter that said he wasn't found to be in violation of the bullying and harassment policy, but he was found to not measure the high standards of the district. And so now we have questions. Why is he still? All they did was swap him with a different coach on the same staff. They just moved people around and shuffled people. So this man who doesn't measure up to the high standards is still allowed to coach, and he's also still coaching football.
And is he teaching as well? He's teaching as well then?
Oh yeah, you can't. He's got tenure. So and I have such a hard time with tenure because, what other profession are people allowed to just do what they want? And everybody says, oh, they've got tenure. We can't touch them, particularly when they're working with children.
That's a fair point. When you brought this complaint, made this complaint forward, and then it was adjudicated as you described, were there other students that came forward after the seal was broken and said and substantiated some of what you just said and added to what your complaint alleged?
Yes, there were students in the classroom that came forward, and they interviewed kids that were in the class because kids were saying to Brendan, like, I can't, and other parents would say to me, like, everybody knows that this teacher has kind of a reputation of being off color and calling people out for things and just, crossing the line. But parents were saying to me, like, yeah, my kid is saying this, he's like unhinged. When it comes to Brendan, he really he does not hold back, and he says some of the most, hurtful and just nonsensical, crazy things in front of everybody.
And Brendan did he get in back and forths with Moretti either with basketball or in class?
No. No, he wouldn't do that.
Okay, so was your son cut by the team? Because it said the Thanksgiving tournament. So he tried out, and was he cut immediately, or was he on the team but injured?
So last year he skipped the Thanksgiving tournament because he was injured, and then this year he tried out. Tryouts were, I think, November 6th and 7th, and then they just posted a list of who made the team Tuesday night, November 7th, and his name wasn't on the list.
So that was a form of retaliation, you think?
Yes, because the two coaches, the coach that they swapped Moretti for, the current coach, Belcaster, he and Moretti are close personal friends. My son is friends with Moretti because he was my oldest son is Facebook friends with him, and he has screenshots of times when here I am celebrating my birthday with my best friend. So really so my husband and I, very important to note that my husband and I were finally able to speak to the coach. We tried to speak to the principal. My husband and I sat down with the principal October 30th, so a week before tryout. We had sent emails. Kevin, my husband, sent an email to the coach saying, because Brennan had another injury this year, he hurt his back, and he was, during the preseason workouts, he was not able to run and jump for a while. He had to dial it back, and he was being seen by one of the top spine specialists, because, like I mentioned, my husband's a physical therapist. So Brendan would go to open gyms when he could, but he could shoot, but he couldn't run and jump. And then gradually he was coming back and able to do a little bit more and whatnot. And the coach he was also on the golf team. So Brendan said once, I can't come to the open gym tonight, coach. I've got golf after school. I've got to meet. So that's a big time commitment. And the coach said, well, you're not going to be golfing at 8:00 at night. You can still come. And Brendan said, well, I also have 4 AP classes, so I have to do some homework. And kids are allowed to have a fall sport. These are optional workouts. They shouldn't be given a hard time if they can't attend.
So what was your conversation with Belcaster, the current coach, and what's your son's relationship with him?
Brennan just went to as many open gyms as he could, and then my husband sent him he was giving him a hard time. He said, if you can swing a golf club, you can play basketball. And, of course, like I said, my husband's a physical therapist, and he said, this man doesn't have an anatomy background. He doesn't know this, and it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same thing. So he sent him an email to explain the injury. He said, if you have any more problems or questions about my son's injury, you reach out to me. I sent an email to the principal. We saw the principal October 30th. He acted kind of like, well, you played your card already. He seemed a little bit like put out, like, why are we meeting again? We've already been down this path. And we were there to say, it's the same thing. It's just a different guy. You've just shuffled people around, and we want to know what's going to happen. Then the tryouts happened, and he didn't make it. The coach wouldn't meet with Brendan. We tried to set up a meeting with the principal, the athletic director, and the coach, and they wouldn't meet with us. And then the athletic director sent me an email and just said, you can reach out to the coach and meet with him. And I emailed back, and I said, is this in place of us meeting with the principal, the athletic director, and the coach? And I got no response. So then the coach agreed to have a phone call with us. So we put him on speakerphone, and my husband and I spoke to him, and our question was, why did our son not make the team? And that was it was very interesting. And he said there was a whiteboard in practice with 15 leadership qualities, and he measured the kids on the leadership qualities, and Brennan just unfortunately didn't measure up. And I
did my
away.
homework on
like,
your son. I mean, I talked to his AAU coach. He was on Big Three. He was on breakaways. Robert Hudson signed a sworn affidavit saying he's an excellent player and he has a great attitude. And not to mention, he's 6'2", 6'3" on the roster, is effective on the court, and his teammates want him back. And the competition was glad he didn't make the team because they don't want to compete against him. So he could play D1, D2.
He went through these 15 leadership qualities, one of which was chivalry and volunteerism in the classroom. My son is very involved in the youth ministry program at our church. He's on a leadership committee there. He, a developmentally delayed man from our church, has befriended Brendan and comes to all of his games. And then Brendan, after his game, walks across the gym and talks to Michael and thanks him for coming. And Michael every time says, can you take a picture with me? And he probably has enough pictures to wallpaper his room. And Brendan repeatedly responds. He has a relationship with him. He responds regularly to all of Michael's texts. He meets Brendan Brendan meets Michael at the track to work on Special Olympics, to help him prepare for his Special Olympic events. So he's a good kid. And so that's why I asked the coach, I'm like, oh, so that's great. You were looking, he said, volunteerism in the community. That was one of the qualities he was looking for. And my husband said, so you were asking kids what they were doing volunteer-wise, like in the fall during their workouts? Oh, no, just during the 2-day tryout. And so I said, well, what volunteer commitments are you aware of that Brennan's involved in? And he couldn't speak to it. He said, well, it was just cumulative. It was just a cumulative way that he didn't measure up. And then, he went through like accountability, passion, communication, like all things that Brendan excels at. I mean, it literally was laughable.
So,
and then he said, from a basketball standpoint, he said he was looking for someone committed to defense. And I said, so Brendan was the top defender on the team last year, so that's great.
Oh, boy.
And he said, now you're making an assumption. And I said, I'm not making an assumption. There's statistics, and it's driven by data, so you can look it up. And then he said the last basketball skill he was looking for was a variety of basketball skills, which to me is probably somebody that's, I don't know, been all conference 2 years in a row.
Like
so we got off the phone call, and we just looked at each other, and I was like, we really were anticipating that he was going to make something up. He had been telling kids on the team that Brendan wasn't making it because of something he said, or the kids on the team just, there was just all kinds of ambiguity. I'm like, why didn't he make the team? Like, we should have an answer. And afterwards we were looking at each other and we're like, this literally could only be retaliation. And that's when we moved forward with the lawsuit.
Yeah, but so the lawsuit, you didn't just seek reinstatement on the team. You sought $75,000 in damages. Why?
Because Brendan could be looked at by college coaches during his senior season. I mean, he lost so much. He stood to lose so much by not having a senior season. He's part of a big family, and it was like going through a grieving process. He would occasionally look at me and say, I just realized today I won't be able to play over Christmas break, and his dozens of cousins that come and cheer him on during, over break. And he was like, I won't have that. My mom has Alzheimer's, lives around the corner from me. I pick her up and bring her to all of his home games. And I cried one day just thinking that she was going to miss that. I don't know how many more times she'll get to see him play basketball and be with us.
And the claim in the lawsuit was a First Amendment claim. How is that?
That's a question for a lawyer.
What?
Yeah, that's how the lawyer definitely, that was what he said. This was Brendan, had every reason to anticipate being able to play. He had the right to speak up and say that this coach last year was, crossing the line and inappropriate. And then we have the letter from the district stating retaliation will not be tolerated. But then it was tolerated. No one would answer. They wouldn't even sit down with us. No one would respond, or I literally could not believe how far it went. I assumed. I'm the kind of person that when something's wrong, you figure out who needs to correct it, and then you wait for a response. And I just couldn't believe that wasn't happening.
So you haven't dropped the lawsuit yet, but he did go to practice yesterday. How did it go?
He did go to practice, and he felt good about practice. He came home. He was upbeat. It went well. He was, chosen first in when the four kids said we're splitting up into scrimmages. The one team captain was like, "I'll take Brendan first." Whoever had the first pick, and most of the teammates were pleased to have him there. Everybody it was just like a regular practice. So he came home and felt, it was good to see him upbeat. I was a little nervous, but he's ready. He just wants to play basketball. The bottom line is he just wants to play basketball. He thinks, talks, breathes basketball. It's all he does. It is his true love. He wakes up crazy early in the morning to practice before school. He practices after school, and that hasn't stopped during this. He's just continued to go to the gym. And
I understand that he's a good player and all that, and made several mentions that he's all conference. So the same coaches that were targeting him and retaliating him against him allegedly played him enough that he was all conference the last 2 years and had some standout games and was athlete of the week. So I'm just how do you reconcile that? So they didn't get along, but he was this all conference and a standout, so he has to be playing a lot and playing well. And then it got to this point. It just doesn't.
Let me just clarify that this is his fourth coach. This is the fourth varsity coach at our school in 4 years.
Oh.
So when Brennan was a sophomore, he had a different coach who didn't mistreat him, who was, impressed with Brendan and played him and was a good coach, gave him good feedback. And so last year's coach did play Brendan, but he would say things to him like, "Stop shooting." And then, I can't explain why he came after him the way he did. I mean, in one practice, Brendan's epileptic, and he came home after a practice. I think it was late February, and he was shook up. I mean, visibly shaking. I said, "Sit down." I was worried he was going to have another seizure. He said the coach just yelled at him in practice and said, "I could kick you off this team, and you and your whole family can go to another school, and you won't even get to play basketball." And this whole thing felt very much like this guy was making his wish come true. I hosted a pasta party for the basketball team, and prior to Brendan coming home saying that this guy shouted him like this, I hosted a pasta party, and when the kids were hanging out, they were talking about the coach, and one kid turned to him and said, I was standing right there, filling up plates with pasta, and he said, "Dude, what does the coach have with you? Like, he just goes off on you for nothing. What's the deal?" And Brendan was like, "I don't know." And that was very eye-opening to me. Brendan had come home and said a few things here and there, but when that other kid said that, I was like, after the pasta party, I'm like, what is his deal? Brendan's like, I don't know, but he goes crazy.
We're
and
up against will you drop the lawsuit if he plays? I know there's a game against Downers Grove South tomorrow night.
I think we'll give it some time and make sure that he's not mistreated and that he gets to have a standard regular season, and then we'll just kind of take a look at it and discuss it with our lawyer.
Erin Savage, mother of Brendan Savage, Hinsdale South. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you coming on and filling in a lot of these blanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer, we will be back. Today it's going to be fairly warm for this time of year, cloudy, some sunshine, breezy, though, a high near 50 degrees. It is now 7 a.m., WIND, Chicago.
One more day. I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News. 8 more hostages will be set free in this extension the day after Hamas released 16, including an Israeli American. Prime Minister